Thank you very much, everybody, and I'm really delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to have you all here with us. It's going to be a very interesting panel. I'd like to introduce our panelists today. We have at the far end, we have Hebe Romero Talavera, who's a member of the Aerospace Research Center of Paraguay. We have beside her Hermann Ludwig Müller, Director of the European Space Policy Institute. Then Jamie Morin, Executive Director of the Center for the Space Policy and Strategy Unit at the Aerospace Corporation in the US. And finally, we have Ikuko Kuriyama, Visiting Researcher for the Institute for Future Initiatives. So I'm really pleased to be here because I think we have an opportunity to hear some fascinating thoughts. They're all think tanks. Their job is to think outside the box. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Their job is to think outside the box, to propose, to challenge established thinking, the status quo, and to shine a light on future possibilities. But before we go into this session looking at the future, I think it would be helpful to the audience, certainly to me, to understand a little bit about the different regional approaches to space and the future of space. So I'll just sit down now and come over, and I'd like to start. I'll start with you, Ikuko-san. If you could just tell us a little bit your perspective, what is the approach to the future of space and space sustainability in the Asia-Pacific region, but more specifically Japan?
Hello, everyone. My name is Ikuko Kuriyama. Those of you who don't know about my institution, it's a think tank under the University of Tokyo for visioning the future, and they pursue recommendation for the issues on the social issues in the future. And so I also thank SPN Space Policy and Strategy to invite me in this wonderful panel. So moving back to the questions. Thank you, Peggy. So yes, I think the perspective, approach to the space sustainability in Asia-Pacific region, but here I'd like to a little bit focus on this Japan, if you allow me. And I think we take a broader approach to the space sustainability. So in fact, the Japanese space basic policy said they are addressing resilience and also global issues is one of the pillars of our space policy objectives. So, and also we pioneers to launch the CO2 emission monitoring satellites called GOZAD back in 2008. So space sustainability is not just space debris for us, but today I would like to a little bit focus on the recent and forward-looking tendency in Japan. So when I'm talking about space sustainability and in the recent trend in Japan, what the key word for me is the taking advantage of the first move. This is, I think, I would say this is the Japan's strategy towards space sustainability. And so in the past, we tend to make an effort to, much effort to technological development, but not as much as for the setting of rules and norms. But now Japan is trying to lead the discussion, international discussion on international rule making on space sustainability. And what makes this position, in my view, is there are, I think, 3 points: and technology and policy and real use case for applying the technology. And I'm going to explain a little bit more in a concrete way. You know, maybe you know that there is a company called Astroscale. very famous now, and it's a visionary company. The company is aiming to address space debris issues as a commercial endeavor. And we are lucky enough to have such a visionary company in Japan. So now Astroscale is trying to, I would say, in the front line or in demonstrating their technologies, new technologies for ADR mission, active debris removal, and JAXA, a partnership with Astroscale, for supporting their R&D and also our funding. And Japanese government also take a central role to promote establishing the institutional environment by authorizing and issuing the license, and also, more importantly, issuing guidelines on orbit servicing. So, therefore, three of these things: technology, policy, and use case of the real use case of the technological application is, I think, these are very important for advancing international rule making, and in Japan is now in the good position to advancing responsible behavior in outer space. And this was really backed by the concrete policy. And so, and next, we are now going on issuing another guidelines. So please keep an eye on Japan's activities. So we we are going on and these activities in the front line. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ikuka-san. It's very interesting. Japan wants to take the lead in international rulemaking. It's about a coherence between making the rules and also feeding it through the ecosystem. Jamie, I'd be curious in the United States. I mean, the United States takes the lead in so many areas as well. But when it comes to things like, if you want to talk about space debris, maybe it's moving very fast, but maybe a little bit later than others, if my understanding is correctly. But then also it has been very much in the lead in other areas of trying to create a sustainable space. How do you see it?
Yeah, I guess I would start with one overarching point, which is for U.S. thinkers on issues related to space sustainability, I think there's a strong thread of thinking about it in terms of the future benefits of space, right? So we're taking advantage of space, in particular now low Earth orbit, for a whole bunch of activity which is relevant for the lives and livelihoods of people on Earth. Certainly the exploration activity is inspiring and important, but the issues that are raising challenges for space sustainability now are primarily due to effort to create value on Earth, whether it's environmental monitoring or communications or what have you. So we should be looking at topics of space sustainability with an eye to sustaining the benefit that humanity gains from activity in space, primarily. So that's an overarching thread. There are a number of key areas, and I won't be able to mention them all, in which U.S. national leadership and others are deeply engaged on space sustainability. I'll hit just two quickly. One is space traffic coordination, right? We are entering into a world where we have order of magnitude more satellites on orbit than we had even just a decade ago. And we are on a growth path that is likely to continue for several years. We've actually done, I think, reasonably well over the last 5 years in grappling with this growth. It's been managed reasonably well, but that has occurred, in my mind at least, largely because much of the growth has been within a single company, who has, of course, all the economic incentives to not run into themselves. It is about to get much more difficult. We're going to have multiple companies operating with thousands of satellites from multiple countries, some of whom geopolitically struggle with communication. So moving forward on approaches of space traffic coordination is a key line of effort that has been underway in the US, I think, for probably about 5 to 6 years now. We recently had the chance at the Center for Space Policy and Strategy at Aerospace to host an event that brought together the European Union Space Surveillance and Tracking Team and the U.S. Department of Commerce's team working on space traffic coordination issues. We have those exchanges regularly, and those, I think, help because it is a global effort. The final point I wanted to raise is that NASA, which for decades has done seminal research on orbital debris, on risks of reentry, on safe operation of satellites, they earlier this year, released a space sustainability strategy document. And I thought it was really remarkable, in part for an agency that has been leading in these areas for a generation or more. There was a strong element of humility in there. And it was essentially said, there is a lot where we struggle to make progress on space sustainability because we lack common frameworks, common set of definitions of terms, common set of understanding of what we're trying to maximize. And so they laid out a need to build to that framework on a global level. And they laid out a need for a significant amount of additional research on issues that get wrapped into topics like carrying capacity and the like, where we don't understand well enough some of the critical variables. So it's a good strategy. It's worth looking at for folks that are interested in the topic. And I thought it was particularly remarkable in that it really did lay out the knowledge gaps and the common understanding gaps that stand in the way of long-term progress here that have to be addressed.
And frankly, and I think that's hugely important, it's one of the things that strikes me that, that humility to admit that, we don't know, we're behind, there are areas, that offers the opportunity for global discussion, actually, because there's no geopolitical advantage in a research paper that says this is objectively the problem that we have in maintaining a sustainable space. So that's very interesting. Can I move on to Ludwig then in Europe? I mean, Europe has been talking about this for a very long time. How do we get a sustainable and secure space for a sustainable and secure planet? What is your view about how Europe is looking at this? How is it approaching this question?
Yeah, I guess I'll resonate with Jamie first. You started with the benefits. So it's about Earth. This is why you go to space in many instances. So when we say sustainability, this is about making sure that space is safe, but it's also making sure that space is used for sustainability on Earth. And this is, I think, what Jamie talked about. And those includes things like being able to live with +2 or +3 degrees in the future to come. Yeah, this is about sustainability of our lives and where space can help. Now, you know that we are in an audience here in a conference where I assume that people are familiar with a few things when it comes to debris and the classical term of sustainability, how it is often used. But the point I try to make, it's really sustainability in space, it's sustainability from space already. Now, to answer your question, really, when it comes to what do we do about the in-space part, Europe is Europe, so you have nations, you have ESA, you have the European Union, you mentioned the EU SST, we work with the EU SST's space traffic management, rules of the roads, distances to respect. I think those are some of the ingredients of what is up for debate. When we talk ESA, there is an effort to work on a bigger community, so not just the ESA missions and what ESA can do about it, but really work on building an ecosystem of others and work in a federated effort. And there is an accelerated, it's called PROTECT. That is something we are supporting. And when it comes to our host country, based in Austria and Vienna, and in the national strategy, there is a particular emphasis on sustainability, and that includes also for Earth. And early next year, we will launch a center of expertise for space and sustainability. And this will be things like smart cities and the like, energy transition. So all this is happening, and we work across the European system. In fact, we work also across the Atlantic. So the meeting you mentioned, we were in, it was Colorado Springs. There was a session, in fact, when this was discussed. I know that the EU SST is very prominent on this. So I think many actors, and the main message I want to give is, A, there can be, obviously more needs to be done. We maybe come to finance in the discussion. It's about money also to be able to do things. But also let's make sure we put forward the benefit and why, in fact, we do this. Why would we clean up an orbit? What do you need it for? So it's really the duality of this that I would really like to, all of us here, to be aware, and when we communicate about it, to remember.
Thank you very much. And Hebe, you know, from Paraguay and from the perspective of Latin America, what is the sort of approach there to thinking about space and the sustainability of space, the benefits?
Thank you, Peggy. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to thank to the European Space Policy Institute, and especially for Alberto. Okay, respect the questions, especially in Paraguay. We are trying to promote a better knowledge about the space. This will lead to a better environmental protection. We are promoting university research in this area. This is important it's a first step about the perspective of the sustainability. The first is knowledge.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So, yeah, I mean, that is always the first step, isn't it? Making sure that people actually understand both the opportunities and the challenges. So a few of you have mentioned opportunities, the benefits to humanity. So I want to dig a little bit more into, you know, we don't talk about space, as Ludwig's just said, for space's sake. Yeah, it's cool, but actually it's got to do something. It's got to add to the economy. So I'd like to dig in a little bit about the link between sustainability of space and the economic opportunities and how those are perceived, how the think tanks, how you think tanks yourselves are looking at the opportunities and pull out whether there are different perspectives on these opportunities. I'll come back to you, Ikuko. Can you just tell me how, again, you've talked a bit about Japan wanting to lead in international rulemaking, you've talked about astroscale, but let's talk about the opportunities. Why does this matter to Japan? Why does, you know, why does sustainability matter from an economic perspective? What is the opportunity that Japan actually sees?
Thank you for the question. Opportunities. Maybe if I use the case as a scale, I think it's because setting a rule can be how to say if I will not say in a different way. So making opportunities because making this sorry, my point is to not sustainability or look as a burden or cost, but making this sustainability as opportunities for cooperation and opportunities for economy and opportunities for partnerships and innovation. So, well, when I use the case of the astroscale, as I mentioned, so we are JAXA partnership with them. So it's opportunities for partnerships and also it's a new technology. So it's also opportunities for technology, innovation, and also opportunities for making a new market, if possible. You know, if still Japan doing this, I mean, because for the astroscale, everyone, it is often said that nobody pay for space debris and removal, but if but now, so as I mentioned that project together with the JAXA and astroscale, it's called CRDS. Then we ask actually the astroscale to remove our space object. It's actually the second stage of our launchers. Then so we pay for that, and then let's think about how to remove that. Then if this is still only Japan, but if someone think that this is really nice and we can follow that direction, then another guy doing this situation, then we can create a market. So we can see that this opportunity is setting a rule and also setting a de facto standard, and in the end we can create new market. This is a opportunity, I think, from
create new markets. Ludwig, let me come to you then. You know, in terms of the opportunities that space is going to create down here on Earth. So we've heard about creating a new market. How are you thinking when you look at the regions across the piece? Where are the opportunities? What's the important thing to be thinking about?
Yes, you asked for regional differences, and I would maybe start by saying that sometimes in Europe there's a certain preference to regulate more than to take the opportunity to develop what you just elaborated. In fact, Astroscale started on a European project in a PPP, public-private, and today it's in Japan. We do this. There are discussions now on EU level, also Germany, so this is happening. And I'm not going to in the details of this, they're only saying that we need to be careful when we do this, that we do not put up an obstacle for the opportunity, which is, at least on two levels. It's an opportunity, you said, creating new markets. So this could be an active debris removal company that makes business. But this is still within the perimeter of the market opportunity of that particular type of job you do for sustainability in orbit. But maybe more importantly, it is really what this orbit, once you have a clean orbit, safe orbits, what you can actually obtain from it. And if you look into the space economy, you could say, well, there are numbers around. You may know some of these numbers. People talk about a 1 trillion economy in 2040, and there's a lot of dispute about it. This is still the economy for the space companies, primarily. Now, it almost misses the point, because what you are after is really to penetrate into other sectors. So that can be agriculture, that can be pharmaceutical, it can be transport, it can be energy transition, it can be pretty much all disciplines, it can be internet, it can be part of digital. And if you look into this, then you get to another multiplier effect. And I think a lot of the discourse, when you talk about space, or Quo Vadis space, and I just consider sustainability as a prerequisite for it, I think this is a part of the discourse that we need to animate. And this is maybe not enough in the debate. Yeah? So to summarize, it is an opportunity for space industry that will put up businesses that did not exist, and Astroscale is a perfect case, and this will happen. It will still be a smaller part of the space economy. It will help the whole of the space economy also to exist, and maybe not to not exist anymore tomorrow because we have a problem in space. But more importantly, you get a multiplier if you take other transversal technologies, semiconductors and the like, and you can compare space to these transversal technologies, you get multipliers from, let me be careful, between say 3, 4 and 5, 6 or 7, and that is big numbers. Yeah? And this is what we really want to obtain from space, and when we say Quo Vadis space, I think this is a big heading. And if you make this heading clear, then also the argumentation why you need sustainability, you need investments, we will come back to that again, to really do something about it. Japan does it with Astroscale. Others maybe, and talking about Europe, do not do it enough yet.
Thank you, Ludwig. I wonder, Jamie, is part of the problem here that we think about space being cool and space on its own, and we don't think about space, almost as Ludwig's talking about, when we're thinking about the opportunities as an enabler. You think about the railroads, or you think about the roads. In and of themselves, a bit of tarmac is not interesting, but the capabilities that it opens are just incredible. So is there a problem here? Do we need to start talking about space differently in order to make people understand the opportunities?
So it's a terrific question, and I actually, early in my career, worked as an economist, and I think one of the most powerful concepts from economics is the notion of the externality, that there exist certain activities that produce unpriced costs or that have unpriced benefits, and that those create imbalances, right, or opportunities for less than socially optimal outcomes from markets. Clearly, pollution is one of the classic negative externalities, whether in space or otherwise. We have, up until recently, really not acknowledged those negative externalities from space activities. We also, as you've just said, often understate the positive externalities that emerge from space activities. We may talk about, you know, technological spin-offs or what have you, but particularly in this, you know, with this move to ubiquitous space communication, and in the face of the climate crisis, the need for extremely timely monitoring of weather for mitigation of effects, and potentially in a future where we have some sort of international agreement on emissions that has binding terms to it, maybe even verification of compliance with it. Those are areas where space can produce enormous positive externalities for society as a whole. And so we have to continually assess and talk about the value of space. But we also, I think, have to challenge ourselves continually to do better. And a number of economic concepts are helpful for us there as well. My colleague Karen Jones at Aerospace did a really good set of research over the last several years on moving toward circular space economy, and argued for life cycle estimates on the environmental costs and benefits of space activity. And I think there's a great deal to be said for that. We need to think in longer terms, and we need to be thinking about how can we maximally reuse and benefit from the things we've already done. By the way, these things get even more significant the further away from Earth you get. Not because the orbits are larger, of course, but if you move to the cislunar domain, right, the cost of moving mass there is extraordinarily high. So the incentive to figure out ways to maximize what you have there is even higher. And all of our traditional ways of throwing away our trash in low Earth orbit, they don't work. Right? There's no atmosphere to burn your satellite up in. So we really do have to become much more serious in thinking about these issues and much more future-oriented, because we're making decisions with generational consequences.
Ikuko, you're nodding away. Is there a point you wanted to make as well? You're agreeing. Has it sparked you with a thought that you want to share with us about how Japan thinks about this?
Well, I don't know it's Japan's whole approach, but I really agree with Jamie about the life cycle assessment is needed. If we, solve the debris issue, then if cause another problem, then it's nothing. So we need to integrate, and we need to take holistic approach to this issue, I think. This is my personal view, but I really agree with what you say, Jeremy.
Thank you for that. I'd like to come to Hebe, because I think just from our discussions before, as far as Paraguay is concerned, you see that when we're talking about the opportunities, Paraguay sees this as an opportunity both for technology and jobs. Am I right?
About opportunities, I think the space sustainability opens opportunities in areas such as engineering, research, telecommunications, security, and environmental management. As more space projects developed in both the public and private sectors, there will be a growing demand for specialized jobs, labor. This could motivate the creation of educational programs and technical training in universities and institutions across the region, leading to highly skilled jobs and fortified local capabilities to participate in the global space industry Is my point of view.
Thank you very much, Hebe. So there's wonderful opportunities. We need to think more about these opportunities, the sort of negative and positive externalities as you're describing them, and that kind of, as Ludwig says, that kind of almost exponential fallout, the kind of ripple effect of space down here on Earth. But one question I have, if what we're saying is we start from we need a safe and secure environment in which to operate, up there, and in which to have dynamic technological, economic expansion, whether it be for Paraguay, Japan, the US, or Europe. But actually, one of my questions is, in a way, well, let me say this. I was talking to a couple of Chinese companies this morning, and these Chinese companies were saying to me, we have some of the strictest rules. We need propulsion on every aspect of a satellite, of a rocket, of everything. We have to actually, even on a CubeSat, he said to me, a CubeSat has to have propulsion so that we can actively deorbit it. And then he said to me, and that makes us uncompetitive. So what is the link between sustainability and competitiveness? Can sustainability be used as an anti-competitive tool by other countries, or even can it place a burden on your own industry? Jamie.
Yeah, so look, this is a terrific question, and let me use the example of Paraguay here. You know, the first satellite launched out of Paraguay involved a collaborative effort between university and government there, and JAXA and NASA, and was launched out of the International Space Station. It was a small CubeSat. I don't believe it had propulsion on it. It's also the case that a small CubeSat launched from the International Space Station will re-enter within a year or two of being pushed out. So it's not a major risk to the sustainability of the space environment. This, I think, argues for a tiered approach. If I am planning to launch 10,000 satellites to conduct business activities in orbit, I think it makes a great deal of sense that I should be subject to significant scrutiny for the effects of those systems on sustainability and other considerations. That doesn't mean we need a one-size-fits-all approach where Paraguay's first satellite, or a satellite being launched by a university class that is a CubeSat that will only last a year or two on orbit, needs to meet all of those same standards. The benefit to the long-term sustainability of the environment is very different. So I think 2, 3, 4 tiers probably make sense, where the things that are being done at vast scale need to be looked at for all of the impacts. What's the impact of it burning up back in the atmosphere? What's the impact of its end-to-end production? All of those things ought to be looked at. But we don't need to do that for everyone, because if we did do that for the new entrants, we would essentially lock in the current participants. And that's, while that may be helpful for individual business interests, that's unlikely to be helpful for the long-term dynamism of space research or the space economy.
And also back down here on Earth, if that's what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we have reasonable considerations about equity as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jamie. Ludwig, you looked like you were bursting to say something.
No, I wouldn't. No, it's obviously a big question. The short answer would be most people will say, yes, this is a burden. People that build a satellite, they have a cost. It's an extra cost, sure. And if they're the only ones to get that as a requirement, they will complain that they are handicapped in a global competition. That is very unromantic and true. So this is one aspect to look at it. Then you could probably assume that somebody like Starlink, they probably have an interest themselves not to screw up the system. So it's a big operator, many satellites, they will have a rule set that makes sure this thing doesn't fall off the skies. So there is a bit of an auto-regulation also in it. Will this be enough if you populate with multiples of these in the future? Maybe not. Maybe the return on invest from a total business case, which has, I mean, that's a number of years, and you cash in on a system. And in fact, it could crash at the end and your business case closes still. So I wouldn't rely on this completely. Yeah. So there is an element of de-risking that people will do, and there will be best practices. I think this will exist. it's necessary. It's also good to get this going and get best practices, because a rule set to establish a law from the skies will not happen so quickly. So you need reality and best practices, and I think what, again, Astroscale is doing on active debris removal is another example. This will happen, and it will set, I think you said, de facto standards, so things are happening and shaping. Now, but the real question is, what do you need to do to protect the economy? It's not only the return on invest of a company, it is really the economic benefit, socio-economic benefit. That's a different way of looking at it. And this is where this whole debate comes into play, and we have a true requirement, I would think, to put things into frameworks that you can only launch things if you comply with certain requirements. And then you have to make sure that this is applied to the maximum extent possible across the oceans in different world regions, so nobody is feeling handicapped. Well, ultimately, this is a need, because otherwise there will be a limit of what the system can take as a risk.
Absolutely, and it leads very nicely to a question I wanted to put to Hebe. As as Paraguay, we have Europe, we have the US, here we have Japan, very big space powers, and Paraguay, an emerging country in space. What do you see as the barriers to accessing some of this technology for Paraguay? Are there problems in accessing, in benefiting and exploiting space and a sustainable space?
The contribution. I think the space sustainability could both the development of new technological industries in Latin America, such as small satellites, manufacturing, environmental monitoring, and remote sensing. These sectors have the potential to generate employment and open up opportunities for the export of space technology and services. Space technologies can improve sectors such as agriculture and management, which could positively impact local economies. Nice.
Thank you. I think one of the questions, we're talking a lot about, the kind of global approach to a secure space so that we can benefit down here on Earth. But the big elephant in the room has to be how can we encourage and involve countries like China and Russia and work on this together so that it's open and available for everybody to benefit. I mean, Jamie, what's your view on that?
So it's an incredibly important issue. I regularly hear from people involved in space situational awareness, tracking of objects in space, that, including satellite constellation operators, that they struggle, particularly when they have conjunctions between their spacecraft and Chinese spacecraft, that getting communications with the operator is not consistent. And so that is a problem now. That will be an increasing problem as the environment gets more crowded, and particularly if we see similar issues with Chinese constellations numbering in the thousands. They're already a very large operator, of course, and a skilled operator. So, I mean, we know they have the capability to address this. It's a matter of understanding how we can communicate internationally in a reliable way. There are technical challenges to be addressed here, particularly with regard to object tracking and sharing data in ways that is making more sense, not creating more confusion. It's not a trivial matter. With regard to Russia, this is a difficult time. And I guess I can't speak on this issue on a topic of space sustainability without a mention of the geopolitical and massive overhanging risk, which is there's apparently, clear evidence that the Russians are looking at putting a nuclear weapon in orbit. So you talk about sustaining the space environment, that does not fit. Yeah. That does not fit. And so that's a massive risk to the entire space sector. And I guess that's a gorilla in the room that has to be addressed on any topic of space sustainability.
And I suppose what we want from think tanks are thoughts about how we can address that. Ikuko-san, you were nodding away earlier as well. I take everybody's nod as a sign they want to say something, so I should just warn you. But Ikuko-san, you had some views on this, I think.
Well, thank you very much. So I really agree that we need to engage China and Russia in the international discussion. And yes, maybe you saw me as a very idealistic, but as you know, the future summit, UN's Summit of Future, adopted the Pact for Future, if I remember that. So United Nations member states, I think including China, agreed to discuss the governance and the international framework on STM, debris, space debris, and space resources. So now we have a commitment or a foundation to engage China in international discussion, and because it's through UN and through using a corpus as a venue. So I think they still participate in the UN, and a lot, I think. They wanted to discuss this issue. And if we can agree some goal, or we can share the goal, even we don't take different, same approach, I think we can work together. As you know, for Paris Agreement, with SDGs, it's miracle that all UN members agree and share the same goal. But we can take a different approach to implement that goal. And this, I think, is a very new model to implement the shared approach, and then every state can take their, declare their commitment by themselves and to raise ambition to reach the goal. And if this innovative governance system is applied to the same debris issues and other things, maybe China and Russia can participate in this.
You're quite right.
Yes.
It's quite right to remember that Pact for the Future. It was very important. And Ludwig, very quickly, do you have a view on this at all?
Yeah, first, thank you for the gorilla. I thought it was an elephant in the room normally.
Did I say gorilla?
Or a bear.
He's
Jamie.
a bear.
Jamie. Okay.
That's the US version. So we talk about the elephant in the room. And let me start by saying there are probably two elephants in the room, or gorillas. We talk about Russia or China people. Probably I would make a distinction between the two.
Yeah.
I think China is investing heavily in space. They may have an interest not to screw it up. Russia may be a different case. But the point I try to make is the other gorilla is really, you could have a rough, not a state, but you could have a rough company that goes to some country and gets the license to kill, sets up a business case of like 3 years of lifetime of a big thing and exploits it and doesn't care about the garbage. That could also exist.
Yeah.
And I think we always look in this on a per country basis or particular countries. I think this is part of it. And if you look at this as like an onion, in the center is the industry, single industry is starting, and I said they make sure that they are safe, let's say.
Yeah.
Around it you have other industries, and they may adapt something of what Starlink is doing, and maybe there is an incentive to do it in the two directions. Around this, you may have like-minded countries that support these industries, and they try to come to best practices, as Japan may be doing with the Astroscale. And around this, it's getting complicated as soon as you go beyond the like-minded, and there is no real solution. I do not think that a debate in the UN will solve this anytime soon. What is the consequence? The consequence is you still need to do your job. I think we need to do our job with the industries, give them the opportunity, but maybe also some obligations, and work as much as we can with the like-minded. And you mentioned what we did earlier this year in the States. Let's do that job and then see that we create an element that maybe is part of a global solution. But what we cannot do is wait for the universal solution. That will not happen.
And on that note, because we've now run out of time, and I'm so sorry, there were so many other questions I wanted to ask, I think that's very important to remember. We shouldn't be waiting around for the perfect, but we should be working on what we can do to improve the imperfect. So on that note, I'd like to thank the panel for a really interesting discussion. Thank you so much, everybody, and thank you to the audience.